Hello. Why?
Hi. Are we sailing solo here today?
I'm sorry?
I said, are we sailing solo?
Oh, it may be. I don't know.
Okay.
There were about 10 people signed up. So. Where are you?
I am in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. And yeah, just for a week. And then I'm going back to Vancouver.
Oh, I didn't hear the first part. Where are you?
In Mexico.
You're in Mexico.
Yeah.
Where?
San Miguel de Allende.
Oh, yeah. Are you there for the conference? Just there.
I'm just meeting friends. I've met some friends here, and so we're here for 10 days, and then I go back to Vancouver. I'm enjoying the warmth while I can.
Oh, yeah. I've been there. It's pretty great. I was there for a Taos Institute conference, or it was, or more specifically, Harleen and others. How long do you think we should wait? Oh, there's more people. Oh, here we go. Sally St. George.
There we go. Yeah. I normally give it a few minutes. People take a while to wake up to the fact that it's 12.
Hello, Jean.
Hi, Kermit.
Hi, how are you? Nice to hear you. And hello, Sally. And hello, Jeffrey and Jeff and Ayushi.
Hello, how are you?
And well, so what, since Marlies was the first on, what brings you here?
I am at the moment about to launch into the research part of my degree, and I am looking at humor as a way to get into storytelling that is more, that's lighter, that is a space of invitation and possibility and reframing. So how do we change perspective and see with new eyes that which we've always seen in a particular way, but how do we change that, and how might that affect the way we think of our own story, actually? So that's my interest.
Yeah, well, I think we can speak to that. I think that'll be part of the discussion. And Sally, since your microphone is on, can I ask what brings you here?
Yeah, just the topic. Sorry, I'm just trying to get organized here. I had to take a little break and get up from my chair. And I'm looking now for the video again. Sorry, too many things are open. I think just the topic of humor and using it and engaging with it in ways that are not at the expense of somebody,
Mhm.
I think is important because I think what's humorous is kind of relative.
I think, I
Yeah.
believe, I believe I speak to that.
Okay.
I'll add to that, and I'm remembering, I don't know if I put this in my notes exactly, but I know it was on my mind, is that it's somewhat about the use of humor and about using and a framework that I think helps to use it more with confidence and with precision and with safety. And that includes actively using it, but it also includes being able to notice when it happens, and hopefully a framework to help us look at why, when it happens. After starting thinking about all this, when I was working in, doing therapy, I would start to notice when somebody laughed, and the impulse, I think, is to move on from that as if it's just an incidental event. But I started thinking, I think it's more than incidental. I think it's actually pretty key. I think something happens there that's very essential. And so I learned to just say, okay, well, what was that laugh? What was under that? What was behind that? And by digging into it, sort of conflicts of perspective, or irreconcilable or irresolvable storylines would produce that, or strong incidents of strong emotion, strong social significance. But I'll get into that. So just responding to that. Jean, can I ask you what brought you here?
You thinking what little bit I know of you, that it was going to be interesting. And also, I guess I was thinking just when I'm doing stuff that I think is important, I get very earnest. At other points, I quite enjoy my sense of humor, but there's it's like when I'm standing up for social justice, I just have this tendency to be very earnest. And the third thing fourth, is that a lot of times people take my humor that I think is very funny and very dry as seriousness in a way that's that they get their feelings hurt. A lot of the humor I grew up with in my Eastern Kentucky male culture was taking the piss out of each other. And you can't just do that everywhere. But I keep having to relearn that, embarrassingly at times. So that's more than enough from me, but glad to be here.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts come to mind about that. I have you might have heard of, there's a phrase commonly applied to jokes that, you might have heard the phrase, it's funny because it's true. And people, to that tends to get a nod of affirmation. But per my theory, that doesn't actually tell the whole truth about what a joke is. I think a joke is funny because it's also true. It's pointing out that there's one truth, but it's not the only one. There's another one. And I think with that awareness, when you tell a joke and somebody gets hurt or offended, they're taking it in that way of saying, oh, you just said something that you just said the truth. Now we know who you are. You're the person who thinks that. But I think if you can learn to sort of, do a little judo move and say, no, it's just another way of looking at it. It's, or, there's some of the, it's like, as if I were somebody that would say that. I'm not really somebody that would say that. I was pretend, but just that basic idea that if something is simply true, it isn't funny. It starts to be funny when you realize, oh, there's more than one truth. There's more than one perspective, and they're not reconcilable, but they're both, neither, but they're all necessary. I think that's the highest goal of humor, is to say, okay, there's various perspectives. And low humor, but per my theory, is that low humor says there's various truths and some of them are right and some of them are wrong. By my theory, high humor says there's various perspectives and they're all necessary because they give us a more complete picture of the world. And that's the aspirational quality of humor. And so part of what I'm trying to present is a framework that helps us to, by noticing that, move from what might have been a lower use of humor to a higher one. And once I get into the presentation, I'll move kind of quickly, but hopefully that's the point that I'm getting to. Since we want to get going, is there somebody else? Jeffrey, would you like to say what brings you here?
Hi, good day to everyone. I guess your topic is piqued my curiosity. I'm really curious where we're going to go with this, but I think, one of the things that just part of me is a smile is kind of a precursor to a laughter or perhaps some humor. And I think I'm an educator, teacher, and administrator. And so the minute interactions with students and the teachers, it's just such a huge piece of who we are in this relationship type of building schools. So it's just so important. So I'm curious to hear some backbones to this.
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. When you mentioned smile and laugh, a couple of things spring to mind. I'll get to some of the research on humor, some by somebody named Provine, who researched that when he really looked at what was happening in a moment of humor, it wasn't actually that something funny was happening. It's that there was a moment of strong social connection. And that then, the laugh would come after that. And that's what comes to my mind when I also think in terms of that, a joke sort of starts before the actual cognitive part of the joke. It starts with the feeling that there's a feeling that there are various perspectives coming together in some moment. And so as I've been learning to think of jokes over my life, I've learned to pay attention, not to trying to make the joke, but to try and notice that there's a feeling in me that there's something funny to say here. There's something potentially funny. And what I've come to conclude about that is that I'm feeling like I'm sensing that there's various perspectives and there's a potential meeting of minds that I haven't quite found yet. And I'll just go into that emotional space and try to find out what they are. And if I can stay with it, then yeah, words will come that can capture that. Does that respond at all to what you were just saying?
I think partially. I want to go further. I'm looking to hear more.
Yeah. Hopefully I will. Suzanne, since you're on screen, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, it's a bit left field. Well, I love humour, and I see its power in so many ways. I spent a long time studying a book called A Course in Miracles. And there's a line in that there's a question, how did the separation happen? And the line is, because the Son of God forgot to laugh. And it's this whole idea that, so it's kind of fundamentally about construction, but it's, we created this whole world of separation because we forgot to laugh at the tiny mad idea. So I thought I'd offer that into this time together.
That's perfect. One of the things that brought me to this was there were various moments that made me think, as I said before, that I think humor it's not just incidental, it's actually really key. And I actually got to the point, I have thought about humor for a lot through my life, and I'll touch on that. That it occurred to me at some point, there's something really elemental to being human here. There's something essential to being human. And I started wondering if it would be possible to figure out at what point did we start to call ourselves human, and in what way was humor a part of that? that question actually came to my mind, and I can say when I can actually pinpoint when that thought came. And yeah, you were just saying, but I think it's basically that there's something really key and critical to humor that defines humanity. There was something else you said I wanted to respond to, but I lost track of it. But hopefully I'll get to it in the presentation. Is there anybody else that was not on screen that might have something to add? Ayushi or Jeff?
Are you want to go first? Or I can go. Hi, Kermit.
Hey, Jeff.
I'm new to the Tau Institute and certainly happy to be here. My research is focused on psychological health and safety in the workplace. And I think the session today, being able to effectively utilize humor in a workplace where we're playing a number of different roles, often in kind of a cast like system per se, is key to our ability to personal risk, not only with peer to peer, but also with employees to managers. So I'm very interested in the topic, and there's a lot of relatable conversation already going on that I think is applicable to being able to use humor effectively in the workplace.
Thank you. I hope I can help with that. Yeah. And as I said, I'll move through the presentation quickly because I think there is a framework that I hope can help with that. That's what I'm trying to develop that. So we can talk about that. And Ayushi?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ayushi, and I'm a second year PhD student from India. So I'm doing my social psychology PhD, and I'm revolving my work around student migration. So I don't have any direct experience or encounter with the work of humor, but just the topic and the description was interesting enough to bring me here. And of course, like I've been working around the conceptualization of self and identity and how it revolves around when an individual is migrating for educational purposes. So of course there are jokes and there are deeper complexities of humor that come out and reflect some sort of racist attitude and very very broad social structure. So I'm interested in actually there's nothing very specific, but I was very interested and intrigued by the description. So thank you.
I think I can respond to that by noting a note that Gene put in the chat, where he mentions that he noticed that he's remembering how earnestness pulls him away from appreciating complexity in a situation. And that reminded me that part of where this came from for me was throughout my life, noticing that at some of the most dire, most difficult, most painful, situations that I've been in, humor was present. And it was significant that they were. Or in my therapeutic practice, I noticed that when a lot of the turns to big changes that I could look back on as having been positive, I could find a place where we laughed that I would mark as a turning point. And I think so. And I think that's somewhat can respond to how that might apply to what you're working with, Ayushi, that that when people are coming together in difficult situations and being present for all the various possibilities and all the various complexities and all the various realities that have to be sorted through, and being away, alert and awake to not just the one answer, but the many, as is necessary in a crisis. It's almost impossible that if you're really fully doing that, there won't be a moment that you laugh. And that thought I found has sometimes helped people find their way. I once, in the course of developing this, I did a presentation at an open dialogue conference. I did a workshop, and there was a psychiatrist from Japan who's, when we did this intro, he said, I don't know, he said, I'm not very funny, but I think I should learn. And in the course of the workshop, we talked about how he works. And he says, well, when I'm with a client or with a family, we were looking for the one answer. That's my job. And I proposed, okay, well, if you were to focus instead on going around the circle and not finding the one answer, but finding more and more perspectives so that you can get a multidimensional view of the situation, two things could happen. One is you'll get a fuller and deeper understanding. And at some point, people are going to laugh, because when you move around and, everybody's adding, these tensions arise and then they are resolved. And that's the goal. So with that, I will jump into my prepared presentation. I will do the shared content. I hope this will work. Don't really know what. Okay. Don't know why it's doing that. I guess I'm gonna have to stop that recording. Okay, I think it's working now. All right, are you all seeing my screen? Hello?
Yes, it's visible.
Say again?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, good. And you're seeing my, I guess you're seeing my notes too, right? You're seeing everything. But
We are.
I'll just go with that.
You're seeing everything. Yep.
Yeah. That's okay. All right, here we are. We've already talked about, I think, okay, one reason that people have noted that humor is important to them. Clearly, that's why we're here. One of the things that caused me to put this together is realizing that, or finding the statistic that when people are asked what they most look for in a mate, it's pretty consistently right up at toward the top of the list, and often at the top of the list, people put sense of humor. And so I wondered, why would that be? And bearing on something I mentioned earlier, I think a case can be made that there's actually it's more than that people want to be entertained. I think there is something actually critical to being human, such that a desire for a sense of humor in a mate is really related to evolutionary fitness. There's something about being human that requires a sense of humor. It's been noted when initial critiques of Donald Trump were being offered. What's his name? Who was anyway? It's been observed many times that he doesn't laugh. He doesn't seem to have a sense of humor, and I think that that's pretty critical. It says something really important. Like I said, it's more than about entertainment. And just a little quick history of my history with humor. I made a film in 1991 about the discovery of comedy by prehistoric clowns. You can see it on YouTube. I can look this up, Before Comedy, with my name. You'll find it. I'm fairly proud of it, and there was a lot of thought that went into it, and it arose in part out of the thing that I mentioned earlier, that going back to early life, when there were deaths in the family, etc., when the people who were at the heart of the situation, the people who were sharing the tragedy most intimately, were together without others who may or may not have been, fully connected to the situation, what I noticed was we laughed a lot. And that struck me. When I went to college, if they were showing a comedy, they would show movies for three times in a night for a quarter. I started going to the first show, noting when people laughed, and then I'd go back, I'd mark the time, and I'd go back to see what would happen again in the second and third showings. And one of the things I noticed is that an entire audience often would either laugh or not laugh. There would be either dead silence or a lot of laughter. It reminded me of a flock of birds just turning in midair, just instantly, and you can't really tell how it happened. And then when I started doing stage work, I noticed the same thing. An audience had a personality. An audience was an entity, and it either laughed or didn't laugh altogether. And you'd learn to work with that while you were on stage. I joined a mime troupe and learned similar things when we played on the streets. Anything that would get a laugh on the stage didn't get so much of a laugh on the street unless I did things that would cause the people on the street to feel each other, to sense each other physically, or to relate to each other. I would put some time into making that happen. And if I succeeded in creating a sort of a unit of an audience, then we could do things that would work on stage. And if we didn't, then it was just people passing by on the street. Nothing like theater happened. And then finally, where this whole presentation really came from was when I went to an open dialogue conference in Tornio in Finland 10 years ago. And I was watching a session in the beginning in a locked room in a hospital, which meant in the context of open dialogue, something pretty serious must have happened. There must have been a pretty dire situation, because most of the time in open dialogue, saying that things are resolved in the home. So there was a family there. I couldn't speak Finnish, so all I could do was watch the interactions, watch the play of emotions. And what I noticed was that in this fairly heavy situation, in a lot of silence, these moments of humor would bubble up. Somebody's eyes would lift up and they would say something, and then everybody else would raise their eyes. And it reminded me again of that thing I saw in movie theaters or in the theater, where it felt like a flock of birds lifting off the earth and turning in midair. And my thought at the time was, I think I'm seeing new meaning arise. That's what I thought. It felt like the bubble of meaning, percolating up from some subterranean place. That's just the same picture from my film, just because I love that picture. It's one of the pictures I'm most proud of having created. It's fair to note that when people think about studying humor, E.B. White put it this way: analyzing humor is like dissecting a frog. Few people are interested, and the frog dies. And that's often the reaction I get when I say I'm thinking about humor. People are pretty wary about it, and that's understandable. So I'm offering as justification that this is actually important the fact that one of Albert Einstein's best friends was Charlie Chaplin. He sought him out when he came to America, and they became lifelong friends. And then later in his life, in the 50s, Chaplin reached out to Sid Caesar, who was the top comedian at the time, and said he wanted to meet. And Sid Caesar didn't understand why. Spent some weeks preparing, studying physics, trying to figure out what they might be talking about. But then he got word that Einstein had died, and it fell to J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was a friend of Einstein, to tell Caesar why Einstein wanted to see him. He said, Albert wanted to see you. He said he figured out the physical equation, and he wanted to talk to you about the human equation. And Einstein had felt that humor was somewhere at the core of it. There's another saying about comedy that I've actually tried to track down the origin. It's unresolved where this came from exactly. Various people have said it. But it's been said comedy is tragedy plus time. And I thought if anybody's going to address that, it might have been Einstein. The question becomes how much time is the right amount of time before something becomes funny or is available to become humor. And if my theory holds, I can offer an equation for that toward the end. It also happened, I'm just mentioning that it's important that part of this theory arose when I went back to school in midlife, having done all the things that I thought I was supposed to do, and they didn't really add up to anything that I felt was true yet. So I ended up by happenstance going to this school, which offers on its, right there in front of you, truth. I thought this is the right place. This is the place to go. And I ended up in this library. And that, it's actually quite possible that that is a picture of me. If it isn't me, it looks exactly like I looked at the time. I have no idea how that happened, but there it is. But I spent a lot of time in this library. And one of the things that I stumbled on, and here we begin the real presentation, in that time was this fact about human eyes. They are unique on the planet because of the fact that the sclera is always visible. That is not true of most animals. It's really, it may be the only animal you can come close, that comes close to humans in this way is dogs. And I think that that actually can be argued to support my theory because dogs co-evolved with humans. Wolves are not like this, dogs are. I think that over the hundreds of thousands of years of our coevolution, being able to interact and interrelate through eyes caused dogs' eyes to change. Anyway, but this is, human eyes, as I said, are unique into the extent of the sclera. Not only that they are always visible, but the extent of it, and that we have these very distinct pupils. And what that adds up to is the fact that you can tell with a high degree of precision, even from a distance, where another human is looking. And that's important because for most animals on the planet, there is no advantage in letting anybody know where you're looking. There's no reason to do it, and there's every reason not to. Horses, for instance, you can't tell where they're looking. In fact, they're seeing everywhere all the time. They have about I forget if it's, it's a 280 or even more than that field of view, and they're seeing everything. If they could read, they could read a book throughout that entire field of view. And I think the point of that is that animals do not like prey, does not like predators to know where they're looking. I'll show you. And predators do not like prey to know that they're being looked at. So, I mean, of course, we can see the eyes, but they're relatively camouflaged. I'll give you a quick demonstration. Just watch how this tiger stalks this boy, and just notice how the precision of where the tiger clearly knows exactly where the boy is looking.
Zoo in Ireland with his family yesterday when that happened. He sat in front of the protective glass to take a picture of the big cat launching itself towards him, as you can see, swiping at the glass after its failed attack.
Just watch next time.
His father says he was surprised how calm his son was in that moment, even if the person reading the story appears a little shaken.
Well, that's to
wow.
Look how savvy the tiger is.
Just say again is that predators they know where our eyes are, and they know when we're looking away, and we don't want them to know that. So somewhere in human history, it became more of an advantage to us as humans to let everybody know where we were looking, than to conceal for our own good where we're looking. And that was, in my theory, that's the moment we started to become human. There was some moment where we decided collectively we can see better, see more, we are safer if we know where everybody's looking all the time. And that's why we have this tendency, for instance, if we see somebody with, how does that make you feel looking at that? It's pretty disturbing, right? We would think that this person wouldn't laugh, or if they laughed, it would be inappropriate, it would be frightening, it would be crazy. You get a feeling almost of an existential dread when you look into those eyes. That's not true of a horse, though. Horse has, we can't see where a horse is looking, but we don't feel that way. It's this. This is disturbing because I think we expect with other humans, we expect to know where they're looking. I wanted to, yeah, let's take a short look at this. Notice how you feel as you're looking into those eyes. I get a feeling of this sort of timeless, ageless wisdom, connection. Again, there's something about looking into other eyes that is critical to who we are. I'm just going to go to the still of that. But you'll notice not so much sclera. I'm not really sure I'm not sure if the white that we're seeing is actually sclera at all or just the mucous membrane. But you get this feeling looking into those eyes. There's a deep feeling that arises. And that raises the question, because the thing is, primates, there is evidence, there's theory and some genetic and other evidence that actually primates have been tickling each other and laughing for millions of years. And in fact, mammals have been tickling and laughing for millions of years. In fact, there's research by Jaak Panksepp on tickling rats, and researchers can develop a relationship with rats such that when they put their hand in the cage, the rat will come looking to be tickled and will actually laugh. They record the sounds. You can't hear it in the human range of hearing, but when they slow it down, it's very clearly laughter, and it's laughter that they have determined is an invitation to play. The rat will chirp and laugh and in anticipation of being tickled. And if they don't get tickled, they get kind of frustrated and angry, and they'll actually eventually bite, or nip at the fingers, trying to get some play going. There's something very essential to being a mammal, is what I'm trying to say, about humor. It's about social connection. It's about, or the way I've thought of it is, it's about experiencing that our nervous systems do not end at our nerve endings. They do not end at the surface of our skin. As mammals, as primates, our nervous systems are actually intertwined. And tickling is about this experience, this extremely important social experience of having your nervous system merge with another, and where the boundary between them becomes, a little, you can start to lose it. And that can be an extremely pleasurable experience if you trust the person that's tickling you, and it can be an extremely unpleasant experience if you don't. And so for me, the part of this theory comes from where in human history did this, primate tendency to tickle and laugh become something else, something that I'm calling the tickle of meaning. It's not physical. There's something actually very deeply existential that's happening, that when we tell a joke, we're actually creating the conditions of sort of metaphorically reaching into another person's soul, into their being, and tickling the possibility of another way of seeing things, another way of looking at things, of saying to them, whatever perspective you have, whatever story you thought you were locked in, it's not the only one. And the story is not over. It's just beginning. There's new perspectives coming. There's new stories arising. And that's what a good joke can do. It can say, you're not alone. You're not solely reliant on your own resources. The good news is, as vertiginous and alarming as it might be to think that there are entirely other perspectives that you can't see, a joke says, kind of ushers you through that moment of fear and disorientation to say, it's good, and it's good over here at the other end of the pool. It's warm and safe. So in thinking about this, I started looking into human history for other, how far back, can we pinpoint the moment at which this happened? And going back 17,000 years, as the cave paintings in Lascaux, which, looking at that, I mean, that's a beautiful drawing. These are beautiful drawings, if you can see them. I mean, I think you could get into art school on one of these drawings, I think. These are gorgeous. That's another one from Lascaux. Just this, I mean, the 17,000 years ago, that is artistry. I could never do that. The only image of a human being in Lascaux is this one. It's a stick figure. This has been commented on by what's his name, the hero's journey. I'm not remembering his name at the moment, but you all know his name, but you probably, if anybody wants to shout it out. But he commented on this, that, I mean, look at that guy. He's ridiculous. It's a stick figure. He has an erection. He's lying on the ground. He's referred to as a shaman in a lot of the art history books. I studied it in high school, and he was referred to as a shaman. And that bird on a stick there is thought to be, a shaman's stick. But he's been knocked over by the bull, and if you can, the bull also has an erection. He appears to be about to importune the shaman, and basically the human here is comic. This is, to my mind, what this is saying is, there's all these noble animals. Lascaux is sometimes talked about as ritualistic or shamanistic paintings meant to bring back prey to the area, but the reality is that prey of this size at that time would have been pretty impractical for the technology that was available. A lot of smaller game, much better opportunities. So I'm just questioning. I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, whatever that is, may or may not be. What's interesting to me about this is that the only representation of a human is comic. And I think, one of the things I think it might be saying is, we are nothing compared to these creatures. These are, we can aspire to that. I guess that's what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if this is so much about hunting them as saying, look at us, we're ridiculous. I think that might be a part of the, beginning of humor. The first footprints in North America, 24,000 years ago, happened to be in New Mexico, where I am. They have determined through a very interesting process of analyzing the flow of water in and out of the footprints, that the first human footprints were actually of humans that were following a giant sloth. The sloth was lumbering around. The humans were following them and placing their footprints precisely in the middle of the sloth's footprint, in a way that they've determined was so soon after the sloth had removed its footprint that it couldn't have been hunting. They could not have been hunting. They could. What I think about it, or not just me, is that what they were doing was they were imitating it. Actually, as they tracked the footprints, they could see the humans following the sloth, seeming perhaps imitating it. Occasionally, the sloth would turn around and seem to be irritated, and the humans would back off a little bit, but then start again. Basically, I think this is the first instance of street mime in North America. I think there's also children's footprints nearby. We can speculate that it was all entertainment for the children. But I think it was also humans sort of seeing, what's it like to be this animal? How does it feel? What is it, it's just taking, again, an exercise in perspective taking. You've probably all seen this, the Venus of Willendorf, often referred to as a sacred object. Something that has been relatively recently found out about these. This is not the only one. There were many of them. Most of them were found in a million pieces. There's very few of them that were found intact like this. And it seems that one of the reasons for that is that they were actually made in such a way that if they were put in a fire, they wouldn't, harden, they would explode. They were actually seemingly deliberately made that way. Basically, it seems like this is a 25,000-year-old practical joke. We can speculate about why, but that's there's some indication that that's what this object is. There were other sculptures at the same time, 25,000 years ago, that were much more artful, much more, the artisanship just better. Anyway, so as I said, what I'm looking for here is how far back can we find the moment at which in human history in which humor arose as we know it now? And there was a theory put forward going back to the eyes by a guy named Tomasello in 2007 called the cooperative eye hypothesis. I mean, he also noting what I mentioned earlier, the extent of the sclera, the precision with which we can tell where other humans are looking. This idea that that we evolutionarily shifted to relying on where everybody else was looking for our view of the world. And this is where this starts to become social construction, where we realize, we just came to this collective understanding that we're going to know more of the world if we can see it through everybody's eyes. That way we can see behind our back, we can see around corners, we can see over the horizon, we can see throughout time, we can see into distant parts of the universe, we can see inside stars, we can see, the far side of the moon. That is what it is to be human, to be able to see so much more of the world than you could ever see just on your own. And I'll just go back a little bit. There's an interesting, some of the research that went into the cooperative eye hypothesis was they would stand in front of an ape and they would stare into their eyes, and then they would keep looking into their eyes, but turn their face up toward the ceiling. In that instance, where they would look into their eyes, but point their face up to the ceiling, the ape would follow the face. But if they kept looking, if the researcher kept their face looking at the ape, but only turned their eyes up to the ceiling, it was as if nothing happened. The ape did not notice that, did not turn their direction. Whereas if this researcher stood in front of a human infant and did the same thing, stared into the infant's eyes, turned their eyes up to the ceiling, the infant would follow the eyes. The infant knew, from a very early age that they should be following other people's eyes. That's where the important sign, that was what was important. And the same thing, if they kept staring at the infant and just moved their face toward the ceiling, they got no response. So that's what I'm proposing, is that this was the moment in our evolutionary history where we branched off of apes, when we started to basically see the world through each other's eyes. And I also call that when we moved from physically tickling each other to tickling each other in a much more foundational, profound, existential way. I don't know. I don't want to say more. I don't want to put value on it, but that's what being human is. That we kind of that's what a joke does. It says, I am in you and you are in me. We are seeing things together. And that, along with being a profoundly important thing to be able to do as a human, what I'm proposing is that one of the things that humor does is it recapitulates that moment where we transcended whatever it was that we were, to becoming human. It kind of recapitulates. That's why I think it's so thrilling. A good joke can be thrilling on that level. It says, oh my gosh, I'm so much more than I even knew I was. The potential is infinite. So that's why I say that humor is the feeling of becoming human. And yeah, I think I've already said that basically. I'm adding to that I think at that point, we became storyvores. We feed on, we live and breathe on stories, on the story that we're in, the story that we share, the story that we're in with others. And I propose that's when our limited response to the world of fighting or flighting or freezing, we added one more. We added fun. And actually, if you do go watch my film, which I made, 30 years ago now, that's basically what that film is about. It's about saying the world is not just about fighting or freezing. It's not just about being terrified. There's another thing. There's another opportunity, and that is to laugh. And saying that, I'm actually pretty proud of the fact that made that film 30 years ago, and I think it says that very well. Now I go back to that, what I said earlier about a thing is funny not just because it's true, it's funny because it's also true. And what that raises is this question of, I think for a thing to be funny, and this is an important thing to know to stay out of trouble when you're doing humor, is that humor depends on epistemic authority. It depends on the person hearing the joke understanding and accepting that you have authority over the thing that you're trying to be funny about. And if you step into another person's world inappropriately and start saying things about their world, about their culture, about their body, about themselves, without having established, what your perspective is and why it is you presume to be doing that and what gives you the right to do it, then yeah, you're going to run into trouble. So hopefully this framework helps to, just being aware of that, just saying, do I have the authority? Do I have the right to be commenting on this? Or on what basis am I? And an example I offer to illustrate this, it's a fairly dangerous one, but it's a pretty stark one, is that when I was growing up, I was very interested in humor. And I remember reading in mainstream magazines, the question put forth as if it was a very legitimate question, are women funny? Can they be funny? There weren't very many female comedians out there. And the ones that were mostly talked about domestic stuff, or they talked about boyfriends. They didn't talk about politics. I think that in much of the world, it was difficult for people to think of women as having epistemic authority in the world of politics. Obviously, that's not globally true or universally true, but I think there was enough truth to it that was a question that people asked. And I think that it's significant because now that question would not come up. Now we know many, many brilliant, female comedians who comment with perfect and unimpeachable authority on what's going on. But I think at the time back then, during these times when people would say, "Oh, women aren't funny," or "Can women truly be funny?" I think it's easy to imagine, in a knitting circle, they were hysterical. In the world that people share together, you can be funny because you understand with each other what is the epistemic authority upon which you are basing your joke. Yeah, as I was saying, who is perceived to be funny and on what basis, and do they have the right, and are they using that? Well, I'll just make a quick note here. It was around this time that I was thinking about this that I happened to notice again the Harvard logo, and I noticed that the Veritas, the truth, is split up on 3 books. And I went looking, and I could not find any instance of the Harvard logo in which that wasn't true. I could not find any instance anywhere of truth being presented as one unified word. And in fact, historically, the original logo, the TAS, the TAS, the book was upside down. And it was because they said, this is basically the Bible. And what they're saying is some part of truth is hidden to us. It's just simply not available. That was the given understanding. Anyway, that's linked to this whole concept of epistemic authority, just realizing you don't get to know everything. You don't get to comment on everything. You have to know that, especially if you're a jester. We all know jesters. Well, the thing that's interesting about jesters is that at the time that they lived, what you wore signified what your rank and place in society was. And if you went out in public wearing something that you really didn't have a right to be wearing, it was a problem. You'd be questioned on that. But jesters, what the motley is, it's a assemblage of, I don't know the right word. It's bits and pieces of the clothing of all the various ranks. And the sign that's sending is, you don't know where I might come from at any given moment. I have a right to comment on anything. And that was a jester's role, is to be to be unpredictable in where their perspective was coming from. Obviously, we all know that could lead to trouble. But this was basically their uniform. They're saying, I'm not going to allow you to make any assumptions about what my authority is. Other examples, the Heyoka in Native American, they would ride their horse backwards. They would say hello when they meant goodbye, and vice versa. And they would, when there were rituals going on, they would jump in and try to mess up the ritual. But that was their job. It was accepted that was their job. Their job was to sort of take the earnestness out of the situation. Jumping around just slightly, more on the feeling of meaning. I propose that rhymes and puns, what they do is they elicit that feeling. A rhyme says these words sound alike, and therefore, in a pun, these words, have various meanings, and which suggests that there might be different meaning. You hear a good rhyme, and it gives you the feeling that there's a deeper meaning there, and it leads you toward that. A good poem delivers on that meaning. A good pun delivers on that. A good pun says these words have similar feeling, have a similar, have some kind of association with each other. I think what they're doing is they're denuding the language. They're saying, language is somewhat artificial, somewhat unpredictable, but are there deeper truths that it's leading us to? A bad pun or a bad rhyme in a bad poem or a bad song doesn't deliver. It just rhymes. It teases you with that feeling that there's deeper meaning, but it leaves you there. It just cheats you. You might, you groan at you groan at a bad pun, or I'm saying not a bad pun, but one that suggests that there's deeper meaning, but it doesn't deliver on it. I have a rule for myself. I won't use a pun unless I feel that it's actually, if you follow it, it leads to something meaningful. And there might be a groan, but it's followed by saying, wait a minute, there's something there, something worthwhile. As I sort of said earlier, what humor does is it says, you're not alone. That's a little out of place here. All right, my basic theory here is that with all of this, we can think of humor as having a low version and a high version. Low humor says there are different irreconcilable perspectives, and some of them are wrong. And of course, you and I, the one that I'm telling the joke to, we are right, and that guy over there, he's wrong. High humor says there are different irreconcilable perspectives, and they're all valid and they're all necessary because they create a fuller, richer, more multidimensional experience of the world than anybody can have on their own, or that anyone in-group can have. I think, low humor is about in-groups and out-groups. High humor is about bringing us all together. Low humor says there's one truth and this is it. High humor says there's always another perspective, so be open to it. Low humor ends the dialogue. High humor is the beginning of the dialogue. Low humor says, this is the story. I know the story. Now you know the story. High humor says, the story is just beginning and we're on this journey together. Low humor sometimes expressed as sarcasm. High humor points out the irony of things. Low humor says we all have bodies and some of our bodies are ridiculous. High humor says we all got bodies, deal with it. Low humor binds us together by reifying or creating or reifying in groups and out groups. High humor binds by saying we're all in it together. Said that. Basically, low humor is ultimately unsafe. It creates this feeling of alarm, but it doesn't transform it. High humor might point out that there's a feeling of alarm, but it gets us to a place of saying, oh, actually, it's okay. We're okay. This is important, fear and surprise. When the film Inside Out came out, the director said, yeah, we were going off of the 7 basic emotions theory, but we thought 7's too many for our, we need simpler for the purpose of the script. So we decided that fear and surprise were the same thing, so we just eliminated surprise. And when I heard that, I thought, that's a real mistake. That was a missed opportunity. Because I think a lot of what trauma is when you've lost the ability to differentiate between fear and surprise. For somebody who's been traumatized, anything surprising is catastrophic. What humor can do is it can say, oh, you feel the fear, you're feeling fear, but it's okay. You know, there's actually that feeling of surprise is actually a good one. It can be delightful. It can be the tickle of meaning. It can be the new things. You know, it can be the doorway to new things. And again, that film I made 30 years ago basically says this. And there's, by the way, there's a shot at the end of that film that we didn't get to take when we were filming it. And I said, okay, I don't need it. It's not necessary. But when we went away and we were editing it, I just said, no, I need that shot at the end. And I actually went back to the location with somebody else, you know, and just faked it. And I didn't even understand then why it was so necessary. It was just emotional for me. And it's because of this. It's that transformation from fear to, you know, from fear being always bad to surprise being sometimes wonderful. More on the same. Okay. That's essentially the presentation. What I'd like to do is two things. I was thinking, let's come back together. I'll end this if I can figure out how. Okay. And would it be possible for us all to be on screen? Okay. Jeffrey, are you joining us? Okay. So here's a little experiment just to see if we can experience anything of what I was just proposing. On my screen, it's me, then Sally, then Jean, then Ayushi, and then Jeff. So in that order, I'm just going to say a thing. I'm just going to pick something at random to say, and then Sally, and then Jean, and then Ayushi, and then Jeff. Follow that by saying, and that means, and then add anything to that. Doesn't have to make sense. Doesn't have to. It could be meaningful to you. It could be anything at all. You just have to link two statements by and that means. That's the game. So I'm going to start off by saying, I see a pink cloud.
And that means good weather coming.
Not here. You're unmute, and Ayushi unmute.
And that means you're not in Evanston at the moment.
Ayushi?
I was about to say something similar because it's past midnight, so I was about to say the same thing.
Say it.
Yeah, that only that you're enjoying the daylight because it's winter season here in India and we don't really get a lot of sunlight. So
your statement is you don't get a lot of sunlight.
yeah, no, my statement is that you're getting to enjoy the daylight, which I'm not
Okay.
at the moment.
And Jeff, what does that mean?
That means that you're nocturnal.
Okay. And I saw smiles. So that's just, I think that, I'm just going to say, I think that illustrates what I was trying to say is that, you know, just introducing new perspectives, different perspectives, new meanings is delightful and binding. I now feel much closer to Ayushi on the other side of the, you know, who's on the other side of the world. By understanding the difference, you know, that I'm in daylight and she is not, etc. I guess what I'd like to ask is, are there any comments, any thoughts, any questions?
I very much enjoyed the presentation, Kermit. Thank you very much. You have also a very nice way of presenting as well. And certainly, your life history adds a lot of context, to your research. As you were identifying kind of the polarity between high humor and low humor, I really looked towards the unsafe versus safe, in terms of how do we create humor to create that safe zone. And I think that that first what I'm curious in is the first interaction with somebody. How do you use humor in a way that in that first interaction with somebody, lets somebody know that they're safe? This person doesn't mean anything other than they're trying to build a relationship with you. And I think what your presentation emphasizes for me is paying attention to the process, more so than maybe the words, especially in a cultural context. I've worked in Asia and Australia and North America, and often the tonality that we use, and even the pace of our conversation for people that don't have English as a second or as a first language can be very important. Especially in the context of occupying a role in an organization where we have to be quote unquote on our game. So I very much appreciated. I think I walked away with a couple key insights today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think to that question of how do you navigate that border crossing, with somebody around humor, I think that for me the tickling analogy really helps. Is that just remembering, that thing is that a tickle can be sublime and pleasurable, or it can be absolutely terrifying and traumatic, and that applies to jokes. That if you gauge, the intimacy that you in fact do have with someone carefully, then you can tell a joke. You can venture a joke. And I just think it helps to remember also the epistemic authorities. Like, where am I? What am I commenting on here? Do I have a right to? Do I have a right? If I'm coming in and commenting on somebody's culture, am I just somebody just walking in with muddy boots on, or am I somebody who's saying, I've been traveling and here's what I notice. Here's what I notice about your culture. Is that true? Am I noticing right? It's about establishing a relationship. I did do stand-up once, because I had a client who wanted to be a young man who wanted to be a stand-up comedian. And eventually I said, tell you what, let's do an open mic. If you get up, I'll go up. And so we did that. And so I worked up a joke, kind of a performance piece that I used to do at parties. And I did it in doing stand-up. And I don't even know whether I succeeded or not. I was just sort of experiencing it. For me, it was about just being in that context and trying to pull it off. But what I did notice was that this joke that I had told among friends, and it was always successful, I realized it was successful because they knew me. And they knew that part of what I was doing was the performance. They knew that this was about me occupying that character's identity and just going as far as I could with it. And they appreciated that. They appreciated that that's what I was doing. And I remember realizing while I was on stage, these people don't know me. They don't know that I'm not that person. They don't know any of this. They're not on that journey with me. So I realized if I'm going to do this again, I have to figure out how to let them know this is a journey that I'm trying to take. Will you take it with me? And then if I could do that, then they would be on my side. And I wasn't motivated to go down that road, but that was my, that's what I think. That's what I realized, is that the skill of being a comedian is being able to take a room full of strangers and get them just intimate enough with you that they're willing to go on that journey. And this actually, I didn't show it, but I'll just describe it. I have some video of George Carlin Does anybody remember him at the first Saturday Night Live? I happened to see it. I was 8 years old, and my brothers said, "There's a new show on. We're going to stay up and watch it." And so that was a big deal for me to stay up late with my brothers and watch this new thing. And it happened that it was George Carlin was hosting it. And in the course of putting this together, for some reason, I went back and found the video of it. And the thing I noticed about Carlin, which was really notable to me, because he is known as a very intellectual comic, very, what struck me is that when you watch him perform, the way he uses his eyes, his eyes are just precision instruments, and he widens them and moves them and places them. And I think what he's doing is he's bringing you deep inside himself. He's saying, here are my eyes, this, and it's incredible what he does. And it's never been commented on. It's always the content that people comment. But I think that that's a lot of why he was what he was because he just put himself all the way out there and made his interior life transparent. So,
I actually find the same with, I'm Canadian, and we watched a lot of SCTV growing up, and Eugene Levy, some of you might know, he had the same kind of features with his eyes, and especially his eyebrows as well, and they just kind of created a lot of humor.
Yeah, that's right. My partner will not let me trim my eyebrows. I'm not sure exactly how that's relevant, but she's like, no, don't touch them.
Everyone's doing it now these days.
What?
Seems like everyone's trimming their eyebrows these days.
It's funny. Well, what's also funny is that the woman I was seeing when I met, Louisa, insisted that I go get my eyebrows tweezed. So that probably tells you everything you need to know about why I went with Louisa. I also, the one time I did trim my eyebrows was actually a few years ago when my father died. I just couldn't bear to stand up and do my eulogy unkempt. So I just went ahead and trimmed my eyebrows, and Louisa took it personally. Anyway, any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, Kermit, I really liked the slide that talked about, I think it was sarcasm versus irony, because I'm not a fan of sarcasm, and ironic kinds of things usually tickle me. So I also like the tickling kind of thing, tickles some part of you that usually results in some laughter. But I also wonder about leaving folks out, because, and this is probably another reason why I came to this, my kids will say to me, they'll cackle and they'll say things and they'll be just uproarious. And I'm thinking to myself, what is even funny about that? What are they laughing at? And so I might even say that to them, and they go, Mom, you have the narrowest sense of humor in the whole wide world. So, and I'm sure there's lots of reasons why they say that, but it's true. I have no idea what they're laughing at or what even makes it funny. So I just worry about funny things that just kind of leave people out. Or things that are supposed to be funny.
Quick thought on the sarcasm irony thing. I didn't say this, but I think the reason that sarcasm is low is because it doesn't open up the possibility of change. And I think irony points to the possibility of change. Irony is about finding an inflection point of different perspectives.
Or even kind of poking fun at yourself, your narrowness, your, opening something up for oneself as well.
Yeah, I think that's where where being self-deprecating can be really harmful and negative. When it's not us, on the journey to something to to growth. But I don't know. I'm not sure how to respond to what you were.
That's
that
okay.
question.
No, that's okay.
No, but it's interesting. It's important. Yeah, I don't know that I've thought about it. Anybody have any thoughts on that? On the significance of times when you're just not part of the joke, or your joke is just falls flat.
Or you have to be in the in crowd, you know.
Well, I think, it kind of runs through your presentation that high humor, at least, is about connection and about shared experience of multiple perspectives. So it's not high humor if its effect is to leave somebody out in a certain way.
I guess I would think
how to be sensitive to that, or how to take that awareness into any given moment. I'm not sure. Sorry, I talked over you.
No. I started talking over you. I think it's I think it has something to do with what I was saying earlier about looking first for the feeling. If you think the joke is all about the content, then you're too susceptible to just sort of walking in and stomping all over, walking in on muddy boots. This is the joke, here it is, take it or leave it. But I think if you're paying attention to a joke as arising from a field of possibility, a field of potential connection, then you're looking first to the person that you're telling the joke to. I mean, the way I think about telling a joke is, I'm not throwing a joke at them. I'm trying to set breadcrumbs. I'm trying to set a trail from from one place on a journey that I took, that if they follow those breadcrumbs, they will get to the same place and have the same experience of delight and exhilaration and new perspective, arriving at a vista that they didn't know was available. And I try to tell it in a way where it becomes not about me telling it, but about them following the breadcrumbs. And I'll step back. And at a certain point, I decided that for the kind of jokes that I like to tell, I have to be willing for the person to just not even get there. They might not, because what's more important is that they follow the breadcrumbs and they do get there. It's not about me having told it. It's about the experience of discovery and exhilaration of finding this thing. And I have just gifted that to them. Something else comes to mind about that I think an important part of this, arising from what just happened with us, is that we take it as a fundamental element of etiquette that we not interrupt each other. I mean, that's just the worst thing you can do, right? And it's just the most impolite thing. But there's one exception to that, and I think this is unconsciously known. The exception is a joke, because a joke works at a particular moment in time when there is the potential to make a connection between various perspectives in that particular way at that particular moment. And there's no other opportunity to make that joke, but in that way, but that time. But here's the important thing about that, is that if you're going to do that, and this applies also to just interrupting for any reason, if you're going to do that, you have an obligation to make a note, to remember what you're interrupting, to note, to acknowledge that you're interrupting in whatever subtle way you can, ask permission, or just kind of at least make an acknowledgement. I'm interrupting, but there's a reason. Do it, present the joke, or the comment, or the whatever. But the absolutely essential thing at that point is to then say, okay, now I'm done and I'm returning the floor to you. And you were talking about rutabagas. So go on. And, make a mental note. What was it that you're interrupting? I think the biggest, most terrible thing that people do, in my opinion, humor or not, is they interrupt and they forget that the person that they interrupted was ever talking. Because as far as the person talking now as far as they're concerned, this is the truth. This is what's happening. This is what matters. I just said it. So whatever you were saying before is no longer as relevant as it was before I opened my mouth. The thing is, if you do this in the case of a joke, if you interrupt and then you just kind of say, there it is, that was the joke, that's what's important, and you move on, you have then lost your right to tell another joke. You know, as far as I'm concerned, your license is taken away. You just can't do it. I mean, and I think that people just start to relate to you as somebody that has no regard. But I think if you can do it deftly, if you can enter a moment and say, oh, here's something funny that can only happen in this moment. Okay, thank you for allowing me to do that. And now back to you. You can, go in any direction you want. Then I think you retain respect. You retain the right. Anyway, you're not a bully. And I think that's the big thing. So, jokes can be used as to bully. It can be as, there can be a way to say, I know the truth. Here it is. Done. And that's terrible. A joke should be to say, yeah, there's all kinds of truths. Let's join. Anyway, I just went riffing off of. So,
I think your narrow sense of humor allows you to fit into tight spaces.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
My issue is I only think of this stuff 5 minutes after the conversation.
I'm gonna offer this. For me, like when I was a lot younger, that was the terrible thing. It's like, oh God damn it! If I'd only thought of it then, but I would be thinking, but my mind would get all just like bound up and trying to work through. But as soon as I started just paying attention to the feeling, just like, oh, there's something funny here. Don't know what it is, and just allowing myself to sink into it, then I found something would just happen. It was a long practice. I'm not claiming to be good at it. I'm just saying, for me, it involved trying to get my brain out of the way and just let the human part of me be in that moment of saying, oh, there's more than one way to look at this. What are some other ones? And then as long as I could allow that to happen, it was just like, like the animals were let out of their cages and they would just find each other, and something would just pop.
I think that idea of multiplicities is really crucial and appropriate for appreciating somebody else's offer of humor as well.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, in the context of this whole week and some of the other presentations and some of what I'm trying to be up to in my own life, there's a lot of need for connection across all kinds of communities, inequalities, and building movement of disempowered, marginalized people and working together to have a larger voice and presence and sense of having each other's backs. It is really important. And I'm just connecting everything you say to how to do that more gracefully, to appreciating multiple perspectives, to having a lightness and an acceptance and an awareness of, am I connecting with the people that are here or not? Is this, do we have enough shared safety? Are we all looking in enough of the right direction that we can do something more? And how can I comment in a playful way on the multiple perspectives? Or maybe even if there's a strong difference here, is there some way that I can inject some playfulness about that? how to even establishing a sense of taking fear and turning it into surprise, creating safety in a new situation where you're trying to get people to have shared meaning. I'm trying to suggest all of the multi-branching places what you're talking about is I guess it's inspiring me toward just more of a sense of lightness and patience, if that makes sense. When I'm in an important situation that's got multiple viewpoints involved.
Well, in fact, where I want to go with this, why I'm doing this, is essentially what you're saying. I want to figure out how to use this approach or this framework in various contexts. I mean, like, for instance, a workshop for therapists on how to use humor, deftly, safely, both as I was saying before, instrumentally, but also as a way to sort of notice, as a way to notice moments in which there's more. Thanks, Jeff. Let's connect. Yeah. To take moments and unpack them. Say, what was there? Where did that come from? What was up there? I'd like to do workshops for couples on how to be funny together. Because I think, for a lot of people, rather than workshops on like, okay, how do we fix both of you so that you can have a prayer of being in relationship at some point in your life? Just step right over that and say, how do you be funny together? Let's try that. Or there's all kinds of, any other, how to use humor in politics or whatever, in activism. That's kind of where I want to go, because partly, I have spent a lot of my career, with like severely traumatized people and people in real crisis, and I'm glad I have. But I'm kind of interested in taking this part of what I've taken out of that and do something that isn't going to fry me to a crisp quite as much as I have been.
I think it was Whitaker who said that, when people are in the greatest trouble when they've lost their sense of humor. So kind of getting that back into their relationships, I think it's pretty important. It's one of the things that I remember from what he said along the way.
I think that goes back to that question I was asking: how much, if humor is tragedy plus time, how do we know the time?
Yeah.
And two things come from that. One is the time is when I think it's right and proper, for instance, when you've lost someone, to say, this is the story, this is it, there is no other story. When I've lost people, I couldn't understand how the world could even keep turning. And to consider anything other than that was unthinkable. But then to know that there's going to come a day where the world has continued to turn, and there is a new day, and there is a new story, and there are new people to love, and that's okay. And I think you can use that to say, okay, all right, not yet, not now, don't make a joke now. But then by paying attention to that, maybe you can make that joke a day or two sooner than you might otherwise have. You can help a person just not be stuck, just for a day or two less. But I think with that, that kind of instrumentality, like, okay, is it time yet? Are we ready now? Or even a joke can say, someday in the future, there will be another story. And I think that can happen. It's as I said, when my family gathered after a horrible thing, and we just started laughing, and it was because, it was just this thing of like, we know someday this will be past. I don't think it didn't, and the person that we lost was, the only right way to honor him was with laughter. So something, I don't know, somewhere in all there. Yeah, tragedy plus time.
Thanks, Kermit. I'm going to
Yes,
have to go,
thanks.
but it's been nice hanging out with you.
Yep, thank you so much. Very helpful.
On the note of like that, I'd like to make something out of this. If any of you would like to connect and talk about what to do next, I'd love that.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.